Hi, Donna.
Hi, Barb. So, so glad to see you. This,
Great to see you too. We've had some amazing conversations for the last little while trying to sort all this through. And I'm just so grateful to you for all the work you've been doing, which is a lot for this reunion.
oh, thanks. Well, I came in a little bit late on the planning committee, but I have to say that it's been really an amazing time getting to find out about people and what they're doing. So, my goodness, 40 years and building the website, adding people's profiles. I was the first line person to read what people wrote, and I had to transfer that onto the website, and it was really wonderful in so many ways because I could see that everybody looks like they're doing really fine, and you know that's amazing considering veterinary medicine could be a harsh mistress.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's good. And it's been really sweet for me to see all these people after all this time and, know what they're doing. We had just such a great class and
Yeah.
a lot of really nice people. So it's good to reconnect. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed that you were able to do that and you got a couple of interviews uploaded, and today you get to do my interview. I can't even think the last time I ever had an interview done other than by the local newspaper. And so
Oh, goody.
pretty cool.
Good. Okay. So here we go. So Donna, can you tell us what did you do right after graduating from vet school?
Yeah, so I was one of those people that decided I elected to go straight through and do summer session. That meant I graduated in January of 1983 instead of June. And that got me out there a little bit quicker. I had remember filling out a ton of applications and sending those off. And of course, in those days, you wrote letters. I mean, could you imagine? Nowadays, you get to do all of that by, just pressing a submit button on the internet.
True.
Back then,
Those
you had
old
to actually,
typewriters.
yeah,
Yes.
you had to have, you had to fill out, an actual envelope and put a stamp on it. And I remember going to the business place where you got your resumes printed, and that was a big deal. And fold those up, put them in, and send them off on their way. And I'd gotten my license for Colorado and for California, and I I don't recall really doing interviews in Colorado, which makes me think that I probably was intent on heading to the hotter weather right then because Colorado, as much as I loved it, was too cold for me. And I remember doing ambulatory wearing, I'm positive, two sets of overalls, just in an attempt to break the wind chill. And so I thought, this is not going to work for me. I want to be able to do work on horses, and nah. So anyway, I ended up interviewing at several places. I kind of did a route from Northern California down to Southern. And I ended up in Southern for my last interview, went home in Colorado, and I was married at the time. And we were staying with his parents and got a call saying, "Hey, we need you in right away. You've got the job in Southern California," which worked out great because my grandmother lived there. And my grandmother raised me. So it was really, I think, overall my intent to be fairly close to her. And I was within half an hour. So I went to this particular practice that was a mixed animal practice. And that really was my sweet spot. I felt real strongly about wanting to work on all animals. And it was a stationary practice with a truck. And then, you were able to go out, do some ambulatory work. And the practice was owned by a married couple who were veterinarians, and the wife was having a baby. So I got there I think just like when she was about ready to give birth. And at any rate, I did not get any training or mentoring whatsoever. I just remember I didn't even, I mean, there was nothing. Here you go, here's a chart, just start writing up things. I didn't even know the prices. They didn't give me a price list. Nothing was computerized. Come on.
Gosh.
Oh my gosh, it was intensely difficult. And again, just really no support. There was another veterinarian there who was an associate vet as well. And but I had some really nice clients, and I made particular friends in a way with one who was an older lady that worked for a veterinarian who was exclusively large animal. He did horses only. And she brought her dog in to get worked on, and it was a diabetic dog. So we had a lot of conversations. And after about 7 months, I was getting a bit upset at the practice where I was at because I did not get paid for any of the night calls. And I asked him about it, and he got angry with me, even though it was part of the job. You had a salary, you worked during the day, these were your hours, and then at night you were going to get 50% of the night calls. And I needed the money. My God, I think I remember back then, I want to say my I had to pay back my student loan. It was so hard. And I needed the money, and I'd gotten into a rental house with my husband, and he was trying to find some work, and it was just a catastrophe in the making. At any rate, I ended up going to L&I to try to collect the money, and they ruled against me because the other veterinarian in the practice wanted to keep her job, and she stated, "Oh no, we don't get paid for doing calls." And I don't know what happened. I had, a contract, it stated it, but L&I didn't take my side.
What's
That was a long
L&I?
time ago. Labor and Industries.
Oh, okay.
Department of Labor and
Okay.
Industries, sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Thankfully, you apparently never had to deal with them.
No, no.
So it's a crapshoot when you deal with them. So anyway, the other lady who I'd worked on her diabetic dog, she talked to me and said, "Hey, why don't you come and work with us? You would be on your own for your business, but I'd be your receptionist just to take the extra calls because the doctor here, he's older. He doesn't want to do as much, and he definitely doesn't want to do the dog house, calls. He only wants to work on the horses." So he and I had a really nice relationship. Sometimes I go out with him and help him on surgeries for horses, and I loan him my books that were newer than what he had. He was probably a good, maybe 40 years older, so he was definitely in his 60s. And at any rate, back then, he was just a really kind person. And to give me that opportunity to get in business for myself really meant a lot. So I ended up starting a house call practice that was all animals. And I called it All Creatures Mobile Veterinary Services. And, boy, oh boy, I loved it. I loved being able to have my own schedule. I loved being able to take the time I needed with everyone. When you're dealing with people and you're trying to get stuff accomplished, that makes a real big difference, particularly if it's a difficult case when you go out to their homes. And it gave me so much insight and really helped my diagnostics because I could get a better understanding of what was going on with the animal based alone on how they were living. Like I had a pig call, these piglets were itchy skin, and I don't know, they're probably about 4 weeks old. And I go out to the little farm in the surrounding area, and I said, "Well, what are you feeding?" And he says, "Oh, they're weaning off their mom, and I'm feeding, a baby food for them, and like a starter." And the mother, he said, the mother was still on her lactating food. And I went out to observe the piglets. They were eating the mother's food, so they're getting a large amount of calcium. So much so it was driving down. They just got itchy from eating. But yeah, they should not have had that much. At the end of the day, they switched out their food. They were fine, and happy ending. But that was my life for about 12, 13 years. My
That's a
marriage
good amount
sadly
of
did not.
time.
Yeah, my marriage sadly did not survive. It
Mm.
it I think my husband was really homesick. He was not anybody who really wanted to live in California. And just a multiple of factors. You know how it is when you're a veterinarian and you're just starting out, and you're super busy, and it's a big challenge trying to maintain any relationships.
Yeah.
So he went on. I just continued working, and eventually I was doing pretty darn well in my practice. I was the first house call practice down there, and I just used a converted mini motorhome that I had made the way I wanted off the line. That was in the days when they were just starting to build those motorhomes for house calls, those huge rigs. And I didn't want anything like that. And I was able to get something that I wanted that was half the price and worked out great for me. It was a little Toyota, so it had great gas mileage too. So it was
That's
really fun.
great.
I did that for a while. And
Where was that? What
Southern
city?
California. Yeah, it
But
was
where?
Riverside.
Okay.
Riverside. And I even did calls as far west out into Los Angeles. I did some calls for celebrities. I did some calls for animal celebrities. They were actually not necessarily, specifically every single one was a celebrity, but they were in the movies. One was, back in those days, those guys from the movie Animals, they ended up moving further and further out east towards Riverside because they were really increasing the zoning laws for Los Angeles. So they couldn't have any exotic animals. So they're moving further and further, east. So that was really cool. So I had a great time driving around, working on all kinds of animals. And then I tell you what, it was like the 90s, and boy, oh boy, we ended up having just a bad time with the aerospace industry. Economically, things went down. I'd gotten married again, had a little baby boy, and I was like, boy, Los Angeles area, it's just violent down here, drive-by shootings, maybe we should think about where else to go live. And ended up packing up everything and moving up to Washington State, where I am now. And in fact, I kind of expected Washington State to be a little different. I didn't expect it to be as cold as it is, even though it's
That's what
kind
I
of
was
equal.
just thinking, because
Yeah,
you said you wanted to get away from the cold.
yeah, even though it's kind
Yeah.
of equal with, latitude for Colorado State, it doesn't get as cold as Colorado. It'll get down into the 30s and 40s for the winter. Sometimes it'll drop down, maybe a few days here and there through the winter into the teens, and very occasionally even less than that. And but the hardest part was for me, bringing my horses up and wanting to ride all the time. It was difficult. So I got to admit that in some ways Washington State really wasn't a good choice for me environmentally, because I missed being able to ride all the time like I did in Southern California. But made it work. And I just I had my horses, wasn't going to give them up. And I did ride quite a lot when it's spring and summer, and even the early part of autumn out here. It is incredibly beautiful, and the weather is very temperate. It's in the 70s, so that's that's the trade-off with California when it was spring and summer, and my God, it was 100 degrees. So as much as I like the sun and the warmth and the heat of Southern California, I have to admit, this is what we live for here in Washington State. So
Yeah.
I'd get some great riding in, and the mud would disappear, and then it'd be absolutely gorgeous. So if you want to see what it looks like, I have a website built for my property because we have events on here occasionally. It's 12 acres, and we call it Eagle Pond Ranch. So eaglepondranch.com. And
Nice.
that's because I have a pond, and eagles come and they swoop down and they just stay in that pond and they bathe and they drink and they hang out. And I've had as many as 6 eagles in my front yard in the pond.
Whoa.
So the
How
whole
cool is
wildlife
that?
thing, yeah, living
Wow.
the rural life, it's something that I always loved, even though I grew up in the city. And it's so hard to make a living in the rural
Yep.
areas.
Yep.
It really is. And that 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 was really crazy because I still, coming up here, I went in and I ended up buying a practice, and for sweat equity. That was kind of bizarre. It was like, hey, do you have a practice for sale with no money down? Because like, what was it going to hurt? All I did was ask. And I finally found somebody who did. I had my little baby girl then, and that was back in '98. And I got a practice when she was just a few weeks old. And I ended up kind of working that practice for about 10 years. So that took me all the way up to 2008. And let me tell you, 2008, woof, that was coming up on 2008. I saw the writing on the wall. I didn't
Yep.
know it
Yep.
was just me. Like, was I doing something wrong?
Yeah.
Why were the practice numbers going? Why was the money going down? Part of it I attributed because I'm in a military town. I'm right next to Naval Air Station, Whidbey Island. So it's Navy and pilots. The growlers and the prowlers are here. And
The
it's
growlers and the prowlers.
that's what they are. Those planes are called the growlers and the prowlers. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's a military town. And I thought, wow, they're sending all the service members off to war, Iraq, Afghanistan, and then spouses would just pack up and move. So I was writing a lot of health certificates for people going back home. They weren't going to sit here, for a year
Yeah.
by themselves.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, just watching, business going down. Not really comprehending. When I watched the news, the big thing was the war. It didn't really talk about the economy. I don't know
Yeah.
if you remember back then,
Yeah.
2008, but
Yeah.
man, things were really getting tough. In the meantime, closer around 2006, I was, thinking, man, things are tough. Maybe I have to get a job to support ourselves and still keep the practice going. So I was looking and looking, and I'd come up really high on getting something like, district manager for 10 hospitals for corporate veterinary. And then it'd be, oh, I'd lose out to an MBA. What? Those MBAs, they really can't run districts. Come on. And they weren't
Yeah.
even veterinarians. So anyway, this was going on, and crazy thing happened. I get an email because I had my resume up on the AVMA. You know how the AVMA has the job board?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, on the website. So I had my membership with that for liability insurance and all that, right? So I had my resume posted, and I get this crazy email from somebody who said they were a colonel in the Army, and that, hey, you too can be, in the Army. I was just like, this is all wrong. I'm 50 years old. What the heck? It's impossible. And,
Yeah.
everybody, I'll bet you there are a lot of people here who got, those mailings that said, hey, join the Army. And it told you all about active duty Army life and all your benefits and this and that. And I just couldn't wrap my mind around that anyway. As much as I'd gotten those recruiting type of envelopes in the mail, I was just, yeah, that was not a thing for me. It's kind of scary anyway, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Active duty, get up and, do PT and all that. I'm not a PT kind of person. Early in the morning, not, it's like I like my own hours. Start work at 8 or 9, not at 6 or 7.
So what
You know,
happened? How did things
how did
shift?
that happen? I mean, isn't
Yeah.
that weird? Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So,
weird.
I wrote back because I come from a military family. My dads, my father and my stepfather were in the military. And respectfully, I said, respectfully, sir, I'm old. My resume shows when I graduated vet school. What the heck? But thank you for your kind offer, you know. And he writes back right away. And this was the time of email. So it writes back right away. Well, this is the reserves and it's way different. Like, if you're healthy, we'll write you an age waiver. And besides, we'll give you a signing bonus of $75,000.
Whoa.
Yep,
Wow.
indeed. It was insane. I thought, this can't be right. What the heck? So I read through everything they sent, and I sat on that information and talked with him back and forth for 2 years. He tag teamed with some other Army Reserve officers, and they would talk to me, answer my questions, and in my head I thought, well, maybe this is the way it's supposed to be, because nobody knows here that way back when I had got the letter that welcomed me to vet school, I had also at that time applied to get into the veterinary corps.
Oh.
So I had at that time, the Air Force and the Army had veterinary corps. And I applied to the Air Force because my stepfather was in the Army, and everyone knows the Air Force is a cushier job. Everyone does. So, okay, I admit it. The thought was scary, but the cushy job of the Air Force was mostly public health, and it was going to get me through school. It would pay all of college, and then I'd only have to give back a few years. And I
Mhm.
thought I could handle that. So I applied, and the recruiter called me in and said, "You got accepted, but this is the year that the Army took over all the veterinarians, and there was no more room for you."
Mhm.
So they had filled their quota. And I remember thinking, well, is that all? Like, can't I get in on that at some point? And no one ever contacted me. I would have been the easiest person for them to recruit back then. So anyway, here I am years later, it's like 50 years old. Finally, 2008's rolling up, and I'm looking at everybody thinking, you know what? That bonus is really important at this point because I need to
Yeah.
save the
Yeah.
house. And my husband at the time was no help, and he was sadly devolving into big time alcoholism.
Mm.
So I had my son, who was coming up on his junior year of high school, and he was a huge help, fantastic young man. His name's Daniel. And my daughter, 6 years behind him. So she was just about 11 years old. And sweet little girl. And her name's Charmaine, named after my sister, who you may recall worked in the lunchroom and then passed away in a tragic accident right after we were out of vet school.
Oh my.
Yeah. And so, yes, so I named her after my sister, and my sister had worked at the vet hospital. And so some of you folks might remember her. And at any rate, that was really important to me, and very wonderful that I had a daughter that I could continue
Yeah.
that memory. So
Is that why
I
you
said,
left vet school early? Is that why you graduated early? Because I
no, no,
kind of
it was
remember
just,
that you graduated before us.
yeah, no, it was just a coincidence. It was literally a month after I graduated that she
Oh
passed
my
away.
goodness.
Yeah,
So
just
somebody was watching out for you, huh?
yeah. So
Yeah.
at that point, like, and that was a rough first year. Like I said, bad time with that doctor who hired me. And actually, by the way, side note, shortly after his wife had the baby, she divorced him and ran. So the two of us were leaving the practice at the same time. It wasn't me. You
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah.
But at any rate, yeah. So
So
here I
back to the military. What happened there?
So I ended up selling off my practice in pieces, basically selling my clients to a good friend of mine, selling parts of my equipment, a lot of my equipment to a friend who was starting her practice in ophthalmology, about an hour away. Another friend who was starting, just people fellow veterinarians who could obviously use that infusion that the cheap equipment would help them. So in a way, I felt like I was, donating organs and helping out, my friends, and that really was a gratification because it's very hard to look at that situation, and it was heartbreaking for me to have to
Mhm.
do that. But by the same token, I had hope on the horizon, and even though it was terrifying to join the military during war, I really felt I had no choice. And that bonus was split over the course of 3 years, so I was able to take that money and immediately make sure I saved the house, and then they deployed me to Afghanistan 9 months after I raised my hand
Oh,
and took the oath as a
wow.
veterinary officer in the Army.
So
But
what was that like?
well, it was surreal,
Yeah.
absolutely surreal. I will say that when I first got into the Army and immediately started training, uh, a friend of mine who I met as one of the Army veterinarians who had been in for a while, she was sort of given to me as a mentor to help me through. She lived right here in Seattle, and I was here on Whidbey Island, so we were going to go to the same unit in Fort Lewis, to do our PT and all this other kind of stuff. Well, she's like, "Oh, Donna, don't worry. When you go to officer's basic, it's no big deal. It's like 2 weeks long, PowerPoint, yada yada yada." So that was not at all true because this was wartime. It was 4 weeks, San Antonio, and I was not doing well in basic training. I don't care if it was officers basic. I was 50 years old, but the only thing that kept me going was I had to do it. And the other thing that was a real eye opener was that I was doing my basic training with other medical professionals who were Army officers who were in the reserve. So let me tell you that there were surgeons who were in their 60s that were getting recruited. There were, with huge bonuses, way more than mine. They were human surgeons, right? They were
Oh
human
yeah.
medical providers.
Oh
They
yeah.
were they were recruiting these folks, and these people were all pretty much, they had kids that were going into college. They were college age kids, right? Because I was behind 10 years on kids, so their kids were college age. They were all older, around my age and even older than me, and their businesses were going down too. So
Oh,
this recruiting into the reserves was huge for them. They were able to, and we had these conversations whenever we were able to be awake, you know, when not running around doing crazy stuff at basic training stuff. So
was
anyway,
it
had a month of
grueling?
that.
Was it really grueling and
Oh
challenging for you?
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. There were like 4 hours of sleep a night. We were out in the field like 5 days, 3 days, 2 days. It was not like, oh, you're out in the field overnight. Ha ha, that was hard. It was no, no, no. We were out in the field. And MREs, that was fun. Um,
What's MREs?
MREs, MREs,
What is
meals
it?
ready to eat, the
Oh,
kind that are packed with lots of toxins to keep them fresh for years. Anyway, no, uh, they're they they're another whole thing. But yeah, I survived on the crackers and peanut butter and those things because I trade with people. Like, you don't want your peanut butter. Think of all the calories. Give those. Anyway, so I lost weight, which can't complain about because I was probably a good 30 pounds overweight anyway. And so that was a good thing. Was getting physically fit. That was a good thing. Then I passed officers basic, got home, and immediately started my specific Army veterinary training. And these were really, really cool trainings. I go off for a week or two to different parts of the country, meet up with other reserve veterinarians as well as active duty. So they throw us all in the same class. It'd be typically a class of, gosh, maybe 50 of us. And we'd be doing things like military working dog surgeries, food safety training. There was a lot of food safety.
And that's how you ended up in food safety. Yes.
That is, yeah.
Yeah.
And I actually found I loved it. It was so fascinating. A lot of the veterinarians were like, oh, we got to go check food. Me, I'm like, oh, food, I love food. This is awesome. I'm in the back of an ice cream plant watching them, make ice cream. I was getting high off the fumes. So I loved it. I loved food safety. And I loved working on working dogs and horses. It brought back my true love of veterinary medicine, which was difficult when you're faced with having to talk to people about money, please pay me. And yes, I really do need that much. My prices were not very high, they were not very low. But people are still going to be people. And it was a struggle trying to have those conversations with people. But in the military, it's expected you're going to do everything heroic for the military working dogs and horses. And the handlers, they had to do what you said.
That's a good thing.
Officer. This is the truth. All of you military veterinarians, this is the truth. You took great joy in this. I know you did. And they had to do what you said. So never a problem. I mean, they were Johnny on the spot. Something was going wrong. They were right there, getting stuff worked on with the dogs and horses. So it was fantastic. My love for veterinary medicine came back also because I was getting paid a secure living wage, and I had the best health insurance for me and my kids, and dental insurance. I mean, everything that you need and want to have in your life is there and provided. And luckily, I was in a military town, so I could even take advantage of running into the PX and the commissary and get food for a lot cheaper, and really great quality food, because I knew about inspecting the commissary. The food is fantastic, the best quality food and safest food.
Wow. So Donna, I'm
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt you, but I'm just curious. Were you living then in Whidbey Island while you were doing this?
Yeah, because in the reserves, you only go and you train for when they activate you to train. The rest of the time, you can have another job, and that's your civilian job.
Wait, did you have another job, or was this the military?
No, I ended up only being able to live off of Army training right then, because I was activated so frequently, because I told my commander that I wanted to deploy so that I could work full time and again get an injection of money in for my family.
Yeah.
So they shoved what normally would take 2 years worth of training into 8 months for me. They just kept sending me to trainings, and I did it. I successfully completed the trainings. And at the end, they offered me first Kosovo, and then I couldn't get to Kosovo, though, because I couldn't get there in time because my clearance, I was running ahead of my clearance. My clearance was taking longer than my training. I swear to God. So I had to have, a special secret clearance in order to deploy. And it was taking them so long. So finally, I took it on myself to track down, where was my clearance? Where was it at in the process? And I tracked it down, and I made them finish the final bid on it. And then all of a sudden I was in the queue for deployment. And what do you know? It was Afghanistan.
Wow.
It's like, darn it, I missed Kosovo.
But how did you feel about going to Afghanistan in the middle of a war?
Oh, I was terrified, because by then I was watching the news, very routinely. And then when they told me they were sending me to Kandahar, I did not tell my family, because at that time, it was 2009, and Afghanistan's worst fighting was in Kandahar.
Wow.
It literally was. So I thought it was just one of those times where you throw your hands up and you're just kind of like, you know what? I I just give myself to God, you know, watch over me, watch over my family, you know. Had gotten everything completely set up with my kids, all their stuff done ahead of time, doctors, whatever. Everything was organized, had a calendar, everything, boom. And how to talk with my husband, like, really, how hard can this be for you? You know,
Wait a
just take
minute.
care of the kids.
Didn't you say that your husband was becoming an alcoholic?
Yep.
So how did he take care of the kids and the house and everything while you were
Yeah,
gone?
it turns out he did not.
Oh my.
Turns out very quickly things devolved, and my son was contacting me and saying, "Hey, mom, what am I going to do?"
Oh my
So I ended up
goodness.
just opening up a bank account, sharing the money with him. And thankfully, he could drive. So he just really took care of everything. He started running everything. Yeah, I'm
Wow.
telling you, magnificent young man to this day.
Boy,
Totally.
boy.
Yeah. So,
What's he doing now?
well, we have a family compound here. He's finished up his, at the beginning part of his engineering degree, just for the associates in mechanical engineering, I think, and taken a hiatus till we can get him back into college, because we will not take out any student loans and just, you know, pretty much pay as we go. So he's doing a bunch of projects for friends, working on their cars. They're paying him, and basically doing stuff, you know, keep things rolling that way. So
Great.
he's always got something going on.
Yeah.
So
Well, I got you off track. Sorry. I
yeah,
was
no
just
worries. No,
curious.
no, I'm very proud of my kids. Both of them
Yeah.
are
It sounds like
quite
they're
incredible.
wonderful
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
So, interesting thing about the reserves for veterinarians, we deploy just 6 months at a time. Human medical providers, the doctors and the nurses and surgeons that I went to basic training, not camp, basic training with, they only deploy 3 months at a time when they're in the reserves. Yeah,
Why is that?
because yeah, well, because they just bend over backwards for the human doctors. That's the only way they're going to get them, and they want reservists because of the fact that we have a huge amount of practical experience. Those veterinarians who graduate right out of school are thrown into the, you know, service immediately. They have to be commanders of their units, and they have to learn how to practice veterinary medicine that time. At the same time, it's virtually impossible.
Hmm.
So the Army developed a program where they made an internship for those first year graduates. And but in the meantime, they had to deploy someone, so they depended heavily on the reservists. And so fast forward, getting through that deployment, coming home, getting back, trying to straighten things out. Think I have things straightened out. The Army calls me and says, "Hey, we could deploy you again if you're up for it." And I'm like, "Yeah, I need money." Because my only choice, remember, by then it was 2009, end of 2009, coming up on 2010. I could not find work anywhere nearby. I would have to literally move myself someplace to go live, to work, possibly Seattle. And then, I mean, it's the same difference, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, I get paid to go and deploy again. I'll go do that. So that kind of played out. And again, my son kind of ended up doing things. My
Oh,
husband kind of went off the rails again. So clearly, you cannot talk somebody into doing the right thing.
yeah.
Long story short, I came back after that deployment, and
To
uh,
Afghanistan again?
no, I got Kosovo this time.
Ah.
He's like, yes, Kosovo.
Why
And
did you want to go to Kosovo so badly?
well, you know what? It was considered a combat zone, but it was not as dangerous. So I got
Oh,
combat pay. I'll be right up straight front. And I also got a combat patch. Let me tell you that when you're in the military, it is very meaningful, particularly when you're a reservist, to have a combat patch, because this brings you up to the status, and it's the best, it really is the truth, to the active duty who typically do have that combat patch, or that particular patch on that sleeve that shows that they have that particular status. It really
uh-huh.
is. It really is. It's something that's not discussed, but it does a long way into your ability, really, overall, because it is really hard to deploy and in a combat zone and run a unit. So everybody
So
could see that
just
you managed to do it.
so what was that really like, Dawn? I mean, it's so beyond what I'm familiar with. And I'm sure most people here, it's just something I don't know anything about.
Yeah,
And I have worked with some dogs. I used to train dogs that were, which you'd consider attack dogs with military dog handlers, ex-military dog handlers. But some of those dogs can be quite aggressive.
yeah.
And I would imagine it'd be a little challenging to work on them as a veterinarian. You'd probably have to muzzle them and who knows what else. So
Yeah, well,
what was it
that you bring
like?
up a good point. I will say this, the German Shepherds were pretty much a problem. It seems like, and I mean, I did have military working dog behavior. I don't consider myself to be an expert, but I did find just through my work with them, German Shepherds seem like, hey, once they learn how to be a patrol dog and attack, that's kind of the way their mind works. And everybody, you better
Yeah,
be on point. You better be
yeah,
watching.
yeah.
And a rule was that the working dog handlers always had to muzzle the dogs, no matter if they were good or what have you. That was a rule, keep the vet safe. What I did find though is when the Belgian Malinois started to take over as military working dogs, they were so smart. They're
Mm,
incredible. They seem to know who the bad guy is and who the good guy is.
wow.
Um, I can't explain it. I just attribute it to the fact that they're just really smart.
Yeah.
And whatever was going on with them, I found that the Belgian Malinois was an incredible dog. They're very high energy. They really need a job. I don't know how anybody could keep one as a personal pet unless they were doing something like agility with them
Hmm.
or search and rescue. But again, they have to have a job.
Yeah.
But they seem to know, yes, we can be attack dogs, but yes, we are tuned in with our handler. And man, they just know that the veterinarian's the good guy.
What about
So
the
it was great.
were there Dobermans too? Because I've worked with
No,
Dobermans and no,
no,
they
no
seem
Doberman.
they seem very smart like that.
Yeah, we did have some Labrador retrievers. Those were
Uh-huh.
sniffers, so they were
Uh-huh.
in charge of finding ordnance or drugs. And the
Yeah.
Labradors, of course, are always wonderful. They're
Yeah.
one of my favorite breeds of dogs, right?
Yeah.
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 So
Yeah. And the
so just
horses, how were the horses to work
fantastic.
with?
Fantastic. And they were very much for parade or other demos to try to help morale. And I have a friend right now who is involved with the color guard for the general out at one of the bases out east. And he was so proud to tell me. It was like, I got an email. I just knew him as a civilian. I got an email from him. He's like, I just got on as in the color guard. And I'm like, man, that's an incredible achievement. He literally was not a horse person first. He
Huh.
took horseback riding lessons for a couple of years before he applied for that. So good on him. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's a fantastic. Animals in the military are just fantastic. I'm a big proponent. So so you ask in general how it is. It's for me, deployments were super hard because I was plussed into a unit. That means I was a reservist who came from a different reserve unit than the reserve unit that deployed. They just needed another spare one or two extra veterinarians to join their unit as well because of the deployment needing that many. And consequently, they ended up putting in one or two of us. We were just called individual augmentees. That means you just get plussed in. Well, anyway, it was hard because you come into a unit where people have all worked together, developed what they were doing, and no, it was really tough. It was very
Yeah.
isolating. I
Yeah.
managed to make up for it myself by getting involved with MWR, getting
Which
to know
is?
chaplains,
What's
um,
MWR?
morale, welfare, and recreation.
Yeah, you use all these things that I've never heard of. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and getting to be friends with the chaplains, civilian personnel that are working there, women, because I couldn't find any other females that were my rank who were officers, and really you're only supposed to hang around with others who are. My roommate was sometimes you have roommates that are, but again, when they're lower rank, it's just not, it's frowned on. So anyway, it's just a thing, and that's just the way it works out. So it's very isolating, and that's difficult, particularly if you're a homebody. And I have a lot of, I have my kids that meant everything to me, my animals, that was my whole life, and to be in that particular circumstances, extremely trying, and so I made up for it by doing things that were important for me to do, that were what I call my projects. So when I was in Kosovo, I created a human animal bond therapy dog program where the local dogs in Kosovo that got on to the base, I was able to use the Army regulations to transfer them into our unit, so to speak, as therapy dogs. And so the soldiers would come over and sign out a dog to take on a run, things like that. So some of those, all of those dogs ended up getting adopted and going home with some soldier who was getting, coming to the end of their tour, so, and going home. So I ended up developing a whole method for getting dogs adopted out and going to, whatever the home was. Some of the soldiers were from Puerto Rico, as an example, and they brought animals back to Puerto Rico.
Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah, so that gave me, I needed to have that type of control over
Yeah.
my life.
Yeah.
Have a very positive, satisfying thing. So that's all
Yeah.
I got. Yeah,
Yeah.
but that,
And
yeah.
I imagine you were immersed in a man's world too. And so there was a lot of patriarchal kind of stuff going on too, and discrimination toward women. Is that true or not?
Yeah, and then that's not made a big deal out of in the military, but women are not necessarily. It's very difficult for women to get through to become full bird colonels, as an example, to become generals. I mean, you pretty much have to very much adopt that type of patriarchal way of living yourself, and it it is there, and you have to be aware that of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It, there is a lot to be gained from the fact that, for one thing, I was a higher rank. I deployed as a major. I did get promoted after my deployments to lieutenant colonel. That does help a lot. The combat patch helps a lot. It helps that I'm a bigger person. I'm 5'8", and apparently I'm the same size as most men in the military, because when I go to get my uniforms, it was like, oh, that size is kind of hard to get right now, ma'am. you know, but
I bet they wouldn't even have my size. I'm so
yeah,
small.
that actually I did have a commander who, she made it to colonel, and yeah, she I don't even know how she found her boots. She was very, very tiny. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, that was the thing. Many other things. There was a lot of negative. There was also a great deal of positive. It was very challenging. And I, when I was done with my 8-year commitment, I extended. I extended 2 years, and then I extended 2 years again. So I extended a total of 4 years over my original 8-year commitment. And that was literally because the Army Reserve, as a steady second job, is fantastic, because those benefits amount to, probably a couple $1,000s a month in benefits, to be able to afford that to my family. to be able to have that steadiness on my resume. Um, Being a veteran, that's another thing. That's a huge benefit in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those benefits and entitlements have made a tremendous difference that created a huge amount of stability in the life of for me and my children. And that allowed us to maintain and stay where we are, always have this house, and eventually make it into a family compound. So everybody lives here, and
That's great.
we have others who live here as well. And this has given, again, that kind of security that I really couldn't get elsewhere. Certainly not working for anybody else. And it was very, very difficult, as I said, having my own business. But fast forward, I got out of the military. They actually offered me an extension of 5 years, which would have put me well into the end of my 60s. That's really unheard of for veterinarians. But they were grooming me to be a commander. The thing was, I just mentally was not there anymore. I didn't want to deploy anymore. I didn't want to spend whatever healthy years I have left away from home.
Yeah. Yeah.
you, who knows? you know? So at this point, I've been home and I took a year to like kind of get the property under control again. Because my son was stuck doing a lot of that by himself. It's a lot. And, so did that. Um, Spent time getting my master's. I thought, well, you know what? I'll be a consultant in food safety. That's kind of afforded me a little bit of money, and I'm starting to kind of do that a little bit. My forte is actually pet food safety, and that's what I did my master's project on. And you know what? I really love delving into what causes and has caused pet food recalls. So it's given me a very different, in-depth perspective about contaminations of pet food. And when I talk about pet food safety, it really is something I care deeply about. And I think that veterinarians are given a difficult time because in vet school we're just taught pretty much by let's just face it, the pet food companies. And at the end of the day, I think a lot of the younger veterinarians are realizing that that's not the whole answer, particularly when you are looking at things like pet food recalls and wondering why that happens. So, I think we just have to have open minds and expand our knowledge and research correctly out there and find out what we need to find out. That
And you
said,
have a podcast about that, don't you?
I do. Yeah, it's called Pet Food Vet. And the first year, I just talk about whenever a recall would come out, I would talk about the cause of that recall. And I also talked about how to read labels and actually what they really do mean, not exactly what we were taught in vet school. And the meaning behind what is the animal food supply chain and the human food supply chain, two very different things governed by different set of rules. Recently, I joined forces with another former Army veterinarian, and she developed a big business in food safety. And she brought me in, and we did a little collaboration helping a pet food company with their food safety plan in order to meet all the new requirements that the FDA has out there. So I do have the ability to do that, and I really do love it. I feel like I'm making a difference. Isn't that crazy? I mean, with pet food companies, especially the boutique ones in particular, they make you crazy because like it's like the Wild West. They're just randomly doing whatever the heck they want to do. But now the FDA is catching up with them and they're saying, okay, where's your food safety plan? Where's your PCQI, which is what I am, preventive controlled qualified individual. I had a special certification to help with creating food safety plans for animal feed. And I'm telling you, when I first looked at everything with this particular pet food company, I thought, like, oh my God, what the hell? How did they get away with selling food for the past several years?
Yeah.
But they're making millions of dollars and they're willing to make the changes that I told them. I said, I will not sign your food safety plan unless you do this. It's non-negotiable, you
Yeah.
know, and they're doing what they need to do.
That's good because I've seen a lot of advertising lately for all this organic, healthy, blah, 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 all this stuff, the foods, and it's from Purina and all these different companies. And I wonder, you know,
Yeah,
how
it's
serious they are
crazy.
about this.
Well, you listened to my podcast. I did start my second season with doing interviews, but that kind of trickled off. And I don't know. I might go back to doing the podcast. I might go ahead and really pound the streets and make that happen even more. But for now, I'm kind of getting a little bit diverted into another.
Yes,
Because I
another
know you're going to ask me,
change.
what's my passion? Well, yeah,
Yeah.
pet food is my passion, pet food safety, actually. But my other passion that's kind of developed, and if I had the ability to go back in time, I probably would have got my board certification in veterinary toxicology. But that takes like 5 years, and I don't feel like I got that kind of time. It's like, oh, by the time I get that, who
Yeah.
knows?
Yeah.
Um, but I right now, what's really come up on my horizon due to a very egregious situation in animal cruelty here on the island, was really trying to understand how to prosecute animal crimes. And as I remember seeing something pop up about veterinary forensics. Somebody had mentioned, like, oh, I'm kind of interested. I think I might take this, course on that or what have you. And I thought, geez, let me check into that. Is that what, you do? You've got veterinary forensics? Does that deal with animal cruelty crimes? And indeed it does. So I found out that I live very close to a veterinary board certified veterinary pathologist, who's just within a couple hours of me, who does do veterinary forensic necropsies, as well as a very famous animal crimes criminologist. She's not a veterinarian, down in Seattle. And they want to do a collaboration with me, since they are looking at doing some research on animal crimes to write for a veterinary journal. So as I'm getting involved with that, I find that I could take veterinary forensic classes and at least get certified in that through the University of Florida Vet School. And they have developed a program there that has not only the certification, but if I want to go on, I can get a master's in it. So I figure, you know what? I have time. It's interesting. I could add it on to my business because, poisoning animals is also a part of veterinary forensics. And I certainly know about poisons from pet food safety
Mm.
because I did have to take uh, toxicology a couple of times during my master's program. And I find I'm fascinated by it. So yeah, I'm gonna head out to the convention here in a couple of weeks down in Phoenix and check out what they've got going on with the other veterinarian who's invited me to work with her, and kind of see what unfolds and see if I could be of any use within, the continue to be of use as a veterinarian. And I know it's kind of like off the beaten track because I really don't feel like I have my head in the game for clinical medicine anymore. And these other offshoots are still valuable, and I feel like I'm doing something positive.
That's great, Donna. So always learning and
Yeah.
always changing. That's very cool, you
Well,
know?
you know what they say, everything builds on each other, and veterinary medicine is the best for doing that. Let's face it, you could do just about any job as a veterinarian. I swear to God, you learn so much, you have a great base to build on, and that's one thing they did say to us in vet school. You can do anything.
Well, good. So is there anything else you'd like to say before we close?
Well, yeah, I want to say that I was thinking a lot about our time in vet school. Can't help but do that since we're working towards getting out at this reunion and seeing everyone. And I was thinking about really how nice everyone was. And I do have just a great deal of anticipation and excitement in seeing everyone again. And uh, I have a great amount of thoughtfulness about what the past 40 years has been like for not just myself, but for everyone else. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about everyone's journey
Yeah.
in veterinary medicine and
Yeah.
where they are now.
Yeah. That's great. I feel the same. That's why we're doing these interviews, isn't it?
Yeah, very
Yeah.
much so.
Yeah. So thank you. This was really, really interesting and inspiring, Donna, that as you're getting older and doing different things and really have an open mind and an open heart and doing a great service for animals and people. So I
Oh,
really
thank you. Yeah,
appreciate
I hope
that.
so. I think that as veterinarians, we somehow always remain service oriented,
Mhm.
and animals play such a large part in our lives, even throughout the time when we might be retired and just have our own time with our own animals. So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
I enjoy that part right now as well. So thanks for doing this, Barb,
Oh, thank you, Donna. It's been
and I will
fun.
see you in person in in just about a month.
Wow. Can't believe it. Okay, then.
Sounds good.
Okay. Bye.
Bye for now.